On the third day of Lucy's diagnosis with stomach cancer, I picked out a grave for myself. Supposedly, this piece of land would ensure that in my next life, I wouldn't be the despised rich daughter anymore. No more fighting over my parents, my brother, over everything. No more, no one to love. I burned photos, clothes, erased all traces of my existence. Then, I slit my wrists, lay down in the bathtub waiting for death in peace. But right at that moment in the center of the graveyard, I received a phone call. "Lucy, I'm terribly sorry. There was a double booking with the graves. This plot has been sold to another gentleman as well. Can you move to another plot? I'm not comfortable with that. You've heard of moving cars, moving homes. But moving graves?" I was furious, blood boiling. I sat up abruptly in the bathtub. The blood, now bright red, splattered on the floor. Dirty words flooded my mind, ready to spill out. But I held back instinctively. I saw my information entered into the system, bound by the contract. Yes, the people from the cemetery were apologetic, but Mr. Jack also signed a contract, didn't he? Therefore, he's not in the system, right? I said calmly, interrupting the person on the phone. "Sorry, I can't move. One family raised 2 daughters, I lost, my parents and brother became theirs. And now, with one grave sold to 2 people, this plot clearly belongs to me. Surely, I can win this battle too, right?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. When the person responded, it was with a deep, magnetic voice. "Miss Lucy, name your price. Any amount will do, consider it compensation." My vision darkened due to the blood loss. I touched my forehead and collected my thoughts. It's not about the money. I need it urgently. However, it seemed that the graveyard was leaning more towards this seemingly wealthy benefactor. They tried to persuade me in a coaxing tone. "Miss Lucy, there are much better plots available, Mr. Jack, he needs this more. Can't you wait a bit longer? Is it for his personal use?" I abruptly interrupted them, causing a slight pause. But before they could respond, I continued. Looking down at my wrist submerged in blood-red warm water, I softly revealed my greatest competitive advantage. "I'm cutting my wrist right now. I'm dying today. I really need it urgently. Please don't compete with me. Or if you really like it, shall we compare notes?" The phone fell silent. I also didn't speak anymore. In my mind, I roughly estimated the situation. It seemed safer to cremate in the afternoon and bury the same day. But in that case, I had to make sure, as soon as I died, someone should immediately take my body. I couldn't afford to lose half a day. Clenching my teeth, I picked up the phone from next to the bathtub. I messaged the top group chat. "I'm planning to commit suicide. Can anyone come back and help me with my body?" Without mentioning stomach cancer, I sent out the message. Just 10 seconds later, I received a notification. Dad left the chat. I gave a bitter smile, lowered my eyes, and thought, perfect, once the body collection is arranged, I'll dissolve the group. Anyway, they have another group. A group without me. Jack cleared his throat on the phone. A mixture of shock, hesitation, and caution threaded through his tone. "Lucy, are you kidding?" The fresh blood flowed down to my elbow from my wrist. Droplets splashed on the surface of the water, replacing my answer. The phone went quiet instantly once again. Then, the next second, the sound of wind in the background suddenly intensified. But I didn't have time to listen carefully because the dizziness in front of me worsened. The group chat remained silent, nobody replied. I pursed my lips, then decisively took a blurry photo of my wrist and sent it. "Sorry, I have no choice. The graveyard is running out of space, and I'm in a hurry. Just reply to me once. This might be the last time, okay?" After about 10 seconds, the phone vibrated slightly. Unexpectedly, there was a reply. It was from my brother. "Thank you." I heaved a sigh of relief and exited the interface. Just as I was about to uninstall the app, the phone suddenly vibrated a few more times. "Emily, sorry, I'll have Dad, Mom, and my brothers come back immediately. It's because of her birthday that this situation escalated. but didn't we all go out for a trip with Emily today? We promised to be back in the evening. Lucy, what more do you want? Are you only satisfied if the whole family is miserable? You can't go a day without pretending, can you? My heart clenched. I pursed my lips and laughed bitterly. Yes, can't go a day without dying, right? Emily, the third year after my adopted parents accidentally lost me. The foster daughter who was adopted from the orphanage out of yearning and guilt for me. In theory, she's my replacement, but from the day I came back home, I've been envious of her, of being the sunshine that pulls the whole family out of the shadows. Unlike me, carrying the aftermath of being abducted and abused, lacking education, being timid and coarse. Making them feel guilty about me all the time only added to the sense of alienation and restraint towards me. I was polite as if I were a permanent guest in that home. Unlike Emily, who can joke, be cute, and play around with the family. Over the years, I've been trying to get closer to them, to blend into this family. Trying to erase the alienation brought by those 7 absent years. Trying to make them love me. But no matter how hard I tried to please them, they always favored Emily more. They even gradually misunderstood my efforts as jealousy, as bullying, as purposefully competing with Emily for attention. Their disgust towards me grew. Until the day everything fell apart. We've checked, the pills in your bottle are just vitamins. So why do you keep complaining of stomach aches every few days? Playing with our guilt, making the whole family take care of you, is it fun? Competing with Emily, is it fun? So now that I have stomach cancer and am dying, I won't bully Emily anymore. I don't want this family anymore. Mom, Lucy, how did you become like this? If you want to blame someone, blame Mom. Don't be like this. Mom will go back now. Mom, don't bother with her. Spouting lies, suicide, right? Fine. Go drown in the Dead Sea. Don't dirty the house and trouble us to pick up your body. A pause of about 10 seconds. The person opposite seemed hesitant for a moment, but still delivered the message. Sometimes I wish you hadn't come back that year. The cut on my wrist suddenly sent a heart-wrenching pain in an instant. It wasn't this unbearable when I first cut it. The pain made my eyes suddenly turn red, tears uncontrollably streaming down Lucy. Perhaps because I hadn't responded for a while, Jack on the other end of the phone suddenly shouted my name. His voice was heavy and intense. The sound of wind howling in the background brought me back to reality in an instant. I lowered my eyes and blinked, quickly applying pressure near the end of my wrist. I slowly stood up from the bathtub. Smiling with closed eyes, I said, "The grave is yours. I don't need it. The graveyard has my information, so we need to meet in person and sign the transfer agreement." I simply arranged to meet at the hospital. After all, the time I spent cutting my wrist was quite long. Without getting it bandaged, I might not even make it to the sea to jump. On the road to death, it'll be troublesome for someone to collect the body. But what I didn't expect was that Jack, who should have been driving from the suburban cemetery, was actually late by more than 10 minutes compared to me in the city. The intermediary noticed my confusion, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said, "As soon as Jack heard that you were attempting suicide, he asked me to check the family address you provided in your file, then rushed here from the countryside, speeding all the way." Upon hearing this, I looked at the man standing next to him with surprise. He was tall, wearing a white shirt, a jacket, and casual pants, with a handsome face. "You just arrived too?" Jack, slightly out of breath, looked at me and said, "Let's go." The mechanical announcement interrupted his words. Jack showed a look of shock and disbelief, staring at me. "You're in this condition, and you're still queuing for registration?" I nodded in confusion. "Yeah, it's okay. I'm not in a hurry anyway. Let's not take up emergency medical resources." "Lucy?" A familiar voice with a surprised and cold tone sounded not far behind me. Turned my head at the sound, and to my surprise, it was Leo. My elder brother, a talented young internist. How could he be here? And obviously, he didn't expect the Lucy calling from the intercom to be me. Furrowing his brows slightly, he walked towards me. The screen of his phone was still on, like in a group chat. Did he know I was coming to the hospital for a seminar today, so he deliberately came to put on a show for me? His voice carried a distant and indifferent tone with a hint of reproach. Leo's gaze swept over the simple bandaged wrist. A trace of disappointment and impatience flashed in his eyes. Nonsense should have a limit. The 3 sons of my family. The eldest in business, the second in medicine, Lucas in racing. Compared to Lucas's sharp tongue, the elder brothers were busier with work, calmer in temperament, and mostly indifferent to me. So, I didn't react much to his words. It was Jack by my side who furrowed his brows. He took a step forward, pulled me along, and brought me into the treatment room, pressing me down at the table. "Doctor, it's an emergency, we can't delay it any longer." With a thoughtful look, Jack glanced at Leo outside the door, obviously hinting something. Leo's face slightly changed, his brows furrowing tighter. After standing still for more than 10 seconds, he suddenly sneered, "With this act, only Emily will believe you. She's so worried about you that she's urging our parents to come back. Is everyone in the family unhappy now, satisfied?" He continued, looking at my wrist again. Leo's eyes darkened, but he said nothing. As if convinced that I would obediently follow, he turned and walked towards the door. Just then, the doctor who had read my medical card information suddenly exclaimed in surprise, "You have stomach cancer? You need to see the gastroenterology department. Visiting the surgery department won't help." The whole treatment room fell silent for a moment. The hand that Jack was holding my wrist with suddenly stopped. Leo outside the door also halted his steps. But unlike Jack's shock, Leo's face clearly showed impatience and disdain. First suicide, now stomach cancer. "Lucy, enough is enough. If you keep this up, there will be no way to end this without your death." My eyes twitched slightly. I pursed my lips and nodded, self-deprecatingly saying, "Then I'll go die." Leo let out a cold breath and wearily massaged his forehead. With a tinge of irritation in his tone that had reached the point of disgust, he said, "After a few hours of meeting, I'm tired. I don't have the energy to watch your drama anymore." Leo's work was hectic and irregular. Over the years, I had become used to silently caring for him and causing less trouble. In the past, I would have offered caring, pleasing words to him without him having to say he was tired. But this time, I held back, sitting quietly without moving. I simply looked at him calmly and said, "Then go home and rest early." Leo's expression froze for a moment. A hint of panic and confusion appeared in his eyes that I couldn't understand. In an instant, it reverted to indifference. "Do whatever you want. Just don't come home." My heart remained as calm as undisturbed stagnant water. I nodded gently and smiled softly, "Okay, as you wish." Suddenly, Jack, who was standing next to me, spoke with a cold face. He skillfully placed my wrist on the table and handed it to the doctor. Then he straightened up, stood in front of me, turned to look at Leo, his eyes sharp and his expression unfriendly as he simply said, "Get lost." The door of the treatment room was closed with a push. Jack pulled a chair and sat down beside me without saying a word. He quietly watched as the doctor removed the bandage. I turned my head to look at him, breaking the silence. "Transfer the contract to me, I'll sign it now. Save you the hassle of waiting here." Jack didn't respond, his gaze sweeping over the gruesome cut on my wrist. He pursed his lips, met my eyes, and asked, "Wasn't it urgent? Why did you give up so easily? If you don't go home, where will you go? You've got the grave, don't you? What more reasons do you need?" He pressed me as if interrogating. I had thought of simply saying I didn't need it anymore to get by. But Jack's eyes were just too serious and sharp. In a moment of hesitation, I had an instinct that lying wouldn't stop the conversation. I sighed and said helplessly, "Getting someone to collect the body is too troublesome. So I'm planning to feed the fish in the sea. I won't need the grave." The doctor seemed startled by my bizarre words. His bandaging action weakened, digging into my wrist, causing a sharp pain. The doctor smiled apologetically at me, raised his hand, and cut the bandage. After a pause, he suddenly whispered, "Won't you try to get better? If stomach cancer is controlled well, there shouldn't be a problem for 5 years." I was stunned for a moment, then smiled and shook my head. "I've lived enough, I don't need another 3 to 5 years." I retracted my bandaged wrist, stood up, and turned my head. I wanted to ask Jack about the contract, but my gaze accidentally fell on the intermediary behind him. Blinking, it suddenly dawned on me. Are these two here empty-handed? So where's the transfer agreement? Jack paused for a moment. His thin lips tightened, and his eyes were murky and unreadable. After thinking for a few seconds, he slowly spoke, "Lucy, let's share a grave." Maybe it was due to losing too much blood. But more likely, it was because Jack's words were too shocking. My vision darkened for a moment. After stabilizing my thoughts for a few seconds, I finally found my voice. "What? Isn't that what you said?" Jack smirked and casually said, "If you really like it, let's give it a shot. I think your idea is great. It suits a lonely person like me. Sounds like a good deal." Pausing for a moment, Jack met my shocked and stunned gaze. Smiling gently, he said, "As a return, I'll help you collect your corpse. How about that?" His palm rose and pressed against his chest. I instinctively recoiled my neck. "Oh, feeling a little tempted now, huh? But given my situation, you should understand that my family might not necessarily bury me. It's okay." Jack seemed indifferent, as if having a neighbor for company is better than nothing. Saying this, he stood up and looked at me. His expression was serene and casual, completely different from when he coldly told Leo to leave earlier. "Lucy, if you're not willing, I can look for someone else." "Deal." I picked a beautiful beach. The remnants of the setting sun dyed the sky, and the sound of the waves filled the air. It's perfect for a brilliant end to life. But now, I'm starting to regret sharing a grave with Jack. Let's just watch the sunset, it won't hurt to wait a little longer. The seawater is too cold at night. Might as well watch the sunrise tomorrow before dying. You're in charge of collecting the corpse, you decide. The night waiting for the sunrise is so long, and blood loss makes it easy to doze off. I thought it must be my preset alarm clock ringing at 5:30 that would wake me up again. I never expected it would be Lucas's video call. The time was 10:30 at night. Jack was soundly asleep in the car. I gently opened the door and got out of the car. Upon connecting the video call, I saw a festive dining table. Emily was seated at the center like the star of the show, but Big Brother wasn't there. "Lucy, are you crazy?" Lucas furrowed his brows, sounding agitated, "Dragging the whole family back for your sake, and where are you?" "Emily has been busy cooking a feast for you all afternoon. Come back right now." Beside Emily's mom also let out a sigh. Her voice was still gentle, but fatigue and disappointment were hard to conceal. "Lucy, stop playing. Come back for your birthday, okay?" Dad snorted, "Making the elders wait for your meal? You bury your nose in books until the cows come home?" His gaze swept over the obviously started meal on the table. I chuckled softly, and then suddenly thought of another issue. Jack collects the corpse, and I die. They could have been done separately. Why should I wait for him? I smiled wryly, pressing my lips together. The next moment, I decisively took a step forward. The sound of water roared, and a sense of deathly silence filled my heart. I'm already dying, I'm not going back. Unlocking the door, it swung open suddenly. Big Brother, dressed in his suit, appeared at the doorway. His gaze swept over the dining table, changed his shoes, and then walked straight to the only bedroom on the first floor. My room. Busy with meetings in the afternoon, he forgot about Lucy. How is she? Still causing a fuss? Speaking calmly, Big Brother reached out to open my room door. The room was empty, all my belongings were long gone. The sliding door of the bathroom was wide open, revealing a blood-red sight. It was shocking. Everyone's expressions instantly changed. As a doctor, Leo reacted the most intensely. He stood up quickly, stepping into the room. After seeing the blood-red scene in the bathtub, he took a sharp breath. His eyes quickly filled with panic and disbelief. "No, this amount of bleeding isn't right. She really intended to die." With a tone that sounded like a statement rather than a question, Leo took out his phone from his pocket. He enlarged something on the screen. The video call was quite distant. I couldn't see exactly what he was looking at, but for some reason, I guessed he was probably looking at the photo I posted of my wrist cut. I thought to myself, as a doctor, if Leo had really checked the depth of my wrist cut, how could he still think I was acting? It turns out he never checked. With a cold feeling in my heart, I tilted my head back and reached for the hang-up button. Yet Leo suddenly snatched Lucas's phone. His face almost devoid of color. "Lucy, stop playing games. Come home or tell me where you are, and I'll come get you." The sea water was cooling, rising to my waist. Jack was right. The sea water at night is really cold. I paused, the water halting my steps, and my gaze returned to the screen. I looked faintly at Leo. Go back, and then what? Continue being an outsider, watching how much you care for Emily. But we didn't wrong you. Lucas's resentful voice came through the receiver, clear but with a tone of certainty that I was still faking it. Unlike Leo, who knew I might actually have stomach cancer, but his conviction was that I was pretending. No one has mistreated you in our family all these years. Before you started scheming, who didn't carefully treat you as part of the family? Why bother competing with Emily for this? They never mistreated me. They just didn't love me. When Emily had a slight cold, the whole family gathered to care for her. But all I got when I cut my wrist was, if you have cancer, then go far away and don't bother us with your corpse. These were my own parents and brother. Why couldn't I compete with her? Why shouldn't I? Lucy, Leo's Adam's apple bobbed up and down, froze in shock for a moment. It was the day when my stomach medicine mysteriously turned into vitamins. Lucy, I really wish Emily was our real sister. Leo's expression shifted to regret and confusion. Shaking his head, his voice trembled. No, that was just a disappointed remark. We just didn't want you to keep comparing yourself to Emily because of jealousy. A big hand suddenly reached over, grabbing the phone straight from me. I turned my head in surprise, only to see Jack standing behind me, seemingly out of nowhere. The moonlight reflected in his deep gaze. People are jealous of others for two reasons: either they feel the other person is undeserving, or because they lack what the other person has. You guys have the nerve to say she's envious. However, you've never thought about making sure she's not lacking. Saying this, Jack sneered coldly, his thin lips curling. Being biased is just being biased, so why give so many excuses? He then tossed his phone into the sea, causing gentle splashes. My pupils slightly dilated. Isn't that my phone you just threw like that? I asked, somewhat surprised. Lucy, Jack said, grabbing my wrist. We stood quietly in the seawater, locking eyes. But he didn't say anything more, only sighed softly. He bent down, lifted me out of the sea. Holding me securely in his arms, he turned and started walking towards the shore. I have a home, come and see it. If you like it, maybe we can work things out. However, that night, I didn't really get to see Jack's home. I was feeling sick from blood loss and catching a cold, so when we arrived, I had a fever. I could only lie weakly in the warm, soft bed, watching Jack attentively change my bandages. I forgot to ask. I sniffed and, with a slight nasal tone, asked, "Why did you buy a grave?" Looking at him, who didn't seem sick at all. Jack raised an eyebrow and glanced at me, expression calm. Being prepared. Is that all? I didn't quite understand. During the day, the cemetery agent clearly stated that Jack needed the grave more than I did. If it was just about being prepared, he wouldn't be so insistent, right? Do you also like its location? No, Jack said quietly as he finished wrapping the bandage. His voice was soft. Next to that grave, my parents are buried. I froze, caught off guard. I opened my mouth several times, but I had no idea what to say. Amused by my reaction, Jack smiled, his tone light, masking any sadness. 7 years ago, in the city's high-profile shopping mall fire, they were both inside. For me, as a gift for when I became a firefighter. I almost died in a fire during a recent mission. I thought, if I could come out alive, I would buy a grave next to my parents. So that if something happened unexpectedly, there would be no time left to arrange it. And then, I met you. That's it. Jack stood up, took some dolls from the nearby cabinet. He lined them up, one by one, on the edge of my bed. The guards are all set. Rest assured and sleep well. Finally, he placed a rabbit doll by my pillow. Jack patted its head. You're appointed as the guard. I couldn't help but laugh. But despite that, his long, slender, fair hands rested on my head, gently rubbing my hair. Jack looked into my eyes, focused and gentle. Wild Lucy that I fished out of the sea. Try hard and keep living. A surge of bitterness welled up in my eyes and then tears welled up. I quickly turned away, looking at the silly rabbit doll on the pillow. See you tomorrow, my guard, I said with a forced smile. Despite having a fever, I lounged comfortably in the room for 3 days. But Jack gradually realized my avoidance intent. He firmly pushed me out, wanting to take me to the hospital. I clung to the door frame, solemnly swearing to the heavens, I promised to take my medication on time and try hard to live. But no, I'm not going to the hospital. Mid-late stage stomach cancer, the first step in treatment is chemotherapy. I really don't want to. Lucy, Jack called my name, his hand on my waist exerting a hidden pressure. I simply let go with both hands, clasped them together, and blinked at him, pitifully. Please, really don't want to go to the hospital. Words paused, my face suddenly darkened. Beyond Jack's shoulder, I saw 4 people standing not far from the door. I didn't know when they arrived, much less how long they had been there. Lucy, my mother, looking haggard, stepped forward. Tears streamed down her face after saying my name just once. Our family has been looking for you like crazy these days. Your brother is still guarding the seashore, and you being okay is really great. She pursed her lips, and I remained silent. Coldly, I raised my eyes to look past her at the guilty-looking Emily, faintly tinged with remorse. A downhearted Emily, with a gentle demeanor and a suddenly aged-looking father who, in just a few days, softened and no longer spoke harshly to me. Everyone was being so gentle, just as if they hadn't expressed their disdain for me 3 days ago. Is it because they've confirmed that I really have stomach cancer? Are they repenting in the face of life and death? When I was alive, they treated me as if I were nothing, distant, indifferent, and disdainful. Now that I'm about to die, they suddenly cherish everything, right? This transformation was faster than the changing weather. I wanted to give them a mocking sneer. But suddenly, a wave of nausea surged from my stomach. I couldn't control the sour and sweet taste, and I quickly leaned on Jack, doubling over and starting to vomit in bouts. At first, it was acidic vomit. Later, it took on a bright red color. Lucy! My mother exclaimed, covering her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she stepped forward to touch me. But I waved her hand away, saying, "Don't, it's too gross." My mother froze, her expression tense and uncomfortable. Jack supported my arms tightly, helping me to lean against him for support. He gently patted my back, his voice low. "We must go to the hospital." I immediately frowned. "No." Jack raised an eyebrow, his tone unyielding but softened slightly. "Go, and when you come back, there will be sweets. Let's go." I straightened up immediately. The past few days, the lesions probably spread, causing bile to backflow after vomiting. My mouth still felt bitter, and I craved something sweet. "My sister, let me handle this." Suddenly, Lucas stepped forward. There was a tinge of loss in his expression but with a firmness as he reached out from Jack's side to take me. "You don't have to trouble yourself." As he moved his arm back, I frowned and dodged Lucas's hand. I found his actions inexplicable. "Isn't it more of a hassle for you?" Lucas's body trembled, his lips quivering as he hesitated to speak. His voice was unexpectedly soft. "Lucy, what I said that day was out of anger, not heartfelt. I apologize to you, I'm sorry. Don't be mad at your body, okay? I'll take you to the hospital, and after the checkup, I'll take you back home to recuperate." I couldn't help but let out a chuckle. And finally, the indifference and coldness they had shown me also appeared on my face. Is this an escort service home or something? At home, all my things had been destroyed. I myself followed your words and almost died at sea. You don't have to bother to collect my body. Though I didn't die but was fished out by someone. But you can just treat me as dead. The one standing here now is a wild Lucy. I glanced at Jack with a deep look. He seemed to have no reaction, but the slight twitch of his lips couldn't hide the emotions he felt that year. Lucas, now you can have your wish. Pretend there was never a person like me in the house. Lucas swayed, his lips pale. One who used to show off on the racetrack and never regretted before. At this moment, he revealed a regretful expression beyond words. With a defeated look and no more words to say. Red eyes, repeating in pain, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Dad Sam stepped forward. Awkwardly smiled at me, handing me a brand new phone. Pretending to be lighthearted, he said to me in a pleasing tone, it's okay, Lucy should be angry at us. It's fine not to come home, Dad bought you a new phone. He even downloaded the software for you and asked cautiously, can you add Dad back? At least let Dad be able to contact you, okay? Saying that, as if trying to prove something, he took out his own phone from his pocket. He showed me the screen carefully and said, Dad was wrong to leave the group that day. Your mom has added me back to the group, see, Dad's here. I pursed my lips, looking back lightly, stepping back from them and standing by Jack's side. No need, one family, one group is enough. Let this group disband. Just as you always hoped. The lost Lucy never came back. Don't come looking for me again, it's really annoying. They don't want me. And I don't want them either. The scenery outside the car window kept receding. I leaned against the seat, opened my palm, and asked coquettishly to Jack, Jack, can I have the candy first, then go to the hospital? Jack glanced at me subtly. I begged for a candy. I grinned mischievously at Jack. Jack immediately laughed along, no, the smile froze on his face instantly. I gritted my teeth inwardly. The car stopped at the traffic light by the pedestrian crossing. Jack reached out and knocked on my head. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. If you eat the candy, then you're not fasting, and you won't have to go to the hospital, right? You promised me, no backing out. My little scheme was exposed. I cocked my head and pouted, acting stubbornly. I said goodnight to my bodyguard, not you. Jack chuckled, fine, go back and fire that dead bunny tonight, exile it to the garbage dump. With that said, just as the green light came on, Jack stopped talking and started the car. The scenery outside the car window kept receding. I suppressed the smile, lowered my eyes and said softly, I'm sorry, Jack. Now no one will bring flowers to my grave. Jack seemed indifferent, with a gentle smile, then work harder to live freely and daringly. While alive, be bold and charming. No need for others to bring flowers when you're dead, you'll start your own flower bed. My situation wasn't particularly good. After the checkup, the doctor didn't give a definitive result. Let's start with chemotherapy, combine it with local therapy, and see how it goes. If the effect is good and stable, then we can consider surgery for removal. Chemotherapy. I sat mournfully on the bench in front of the carousel. Anxiety had grown into a mushroom shape. Even though Jack had brought me to the amusement park to reward me for being brave with injections and taking medicine lately, I still found it hard to be happy. Jack went to buy a hot dog far away, and before leaving, he tied a helium balloon to my arm. Asked me to wait for him to come back. I thought, what if I sneak away now? Lucy. A suppressed, pleading voice suddenly sounded from behind. I paused and turned around to see Mike standing not far away, looking at me with red eyes. Come home with me, okay? You're sick. You can't stay outside all the time. At least there's Leo at home, you know, he's very skilled in medical practice, he'll take good care of you. I couldn't help but chuckle, cutting him off. My condition developed to late-stage gastric cancer right under Leo's nose. How could there have been no symptoms during this period? But Leo could tell when Emily's menstrual cramps were bothering her, yet he never believed that my stomach ache was real. I just... Leo showed a guilty look, his face pale, opening his mouth to say something, only to be interrupted by Jack, who came back with a hot dog in hand. I stared at the hot dog, my eyes lighting up. Jack glanced coldly at these people and passed the hot dog to me. Eat slowly, be careful, it's hot. Nausea hit me right after Jack finished speaking. I couldn't help but collapse to the ground, retching in pain. Jack tried to come forward, but Leo was faster, knelt down beside me, reaching out to help me. Lucy. Get away. Don't touch me. Maybe I had been annoyed by them too much these days. My emotions suddenly broke out as if I couldn't hold back anymore. From the bottom of my heart, a nameless anger surged up, turning my eyes red. Why so late? I've been waiting for you to accept me, love me again, for 15 years. I am not as radiant and approachable as Emily. I don't want to live so prominently, do you know? I don't want to be liked without having to be humble and obedient. But no one taught me. 7 years of absence, between us must be distant, estranged. It takes a lot of love and care to fill the gap. But they already have a ready-made Emily, who fits their preferences. So they don't want to start over, to re-raise a person like me. So they just carried on, trying to make things seem peaceful. I lived in this house with all the comforts, but still felt like an outsider. Eventually, tears escaped my eyes, streaming down my cheeks and falling to the ground. I released my clenched fists, my eyes filled with silence. Just go away, stop trying to disgust me with your so-called remorse and guilt. I really don't want to see any of you. All I ever wanted was to be treated fairly. Sorry. Out of the blue, a clumsy apology was issued. Emily, with red eyes, stepped forward. Slowly, she knelt in front of me. As she opened her mouth, she could barely speak. Sorry. I just didn't want you to take my place in the family, to be pushed out. I never wanted you dead. She was raised to be a pampered girl with love. Apart from the pretending to be mature and increasing family bias against me, in reality, Emily only laid a hand on me once. It was when my family got worried about my frequent stomach aches and were preparing to take me to the hospital for a checkup. She switched my stomach medicine with vitamins. Just that one time, but it solidified the fact that I lied and manipulated my family's guilt for attention. Can I blame her? Of course, I do. But I can't deny that it wasn't all her doing. I know this clearly. They know it too. You should kneel. But it's not just you who should. But that doesn't matter because kneeling won't change anything. Your apologies only make me feel sick. Where does this sense of deep regret, lifelong remorse come from? No one lives their life feeling guilty. They can always find excuses to free themselves, to let go. Just like when I first disappeared, they felt so guilty. I won't look back at them anymore. I grabbed Jack's sleeve, turned, and started walking away. Just as I took a couple of steps, I heard Leo, my eldest brother, with a choked voice calling out from behind, "Lucy, come home. I'm begging you." I halted. Turning back, I saw Mike, who was also kneeling on the ground. Tilting my head, I gave a cold smirk. From then on, they stopped pretending to apologize insincerely. Every day they took turns kneeling at Jack's doorstep, begging for me to come back home. I acted as if I didn't see. I happily went for chemotherapy while dragging Jack to do things that I had yet to do, but this plan was quite short-lived. It lasted only for a little over 2 months before being completely interrupted due to the loss of all my hair from the chemotherapy sessions. I could feel my strength and vitality being drained after each session. You never seem too sad, Jack. During my 3rd chemotherapy session in the hospital, lying in bed, I shook my head. Jack peeled an apple for me, still smiling gently. That's because we've staked it all, Lucy. We will be side by side in life and in death. So, the outcome doesn't matter. I pouted and tugged on the ear of a rabbit plush toy, saying, "You'd better be." A face flickered at the doorway on the window pane. I looked up, seeing someone hastily retreat. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I knew who it was. because the suppressing sobs were getting too much and too loud. Let them stay far away, and please spare me from hearing their sobbing. It's annoying. Jack nodded but didn't move immediately. His gaze flickered towards the doorway, and he raised his voice slightly. It seems like Emily is going to move out. Lucas, I heard she's seriously self-harming. When I saw her yesterday, her wrist was full of cuts, not enough to die, but it looked painful. Leo didn't show up again, rumored to be obsessively researching gastric cancer treatment options every day. I don't want to know, Jack. I don't know how to settle things with them. I spoke softly. All I know is that I'm not curious about their outcomes. Even if they suffer, it won't ease my pain. And I don't need their redemption because I don't believe this family will feel guilty forever. Unless they die. Before my 6th chemotherapy session, the first snowfall came. Wrapped in a woolen blanket, I curled up in a rocking chair while Jack sat beside me, reading a book. Rocking the chair with his feet, he tried to lull me to sleep. I slowly lifted my eyelids. In the yard outside the French doors, 6 people were kneeling in a row. I stretched and finally emerged from the blanket, looking at Jack. Let's go to the cemetery. Let's visit our parents and pay our respects. It was the final chemotherapy session. The outcome would determine whether I was in the late stages waiting for death or there was a chance of recovery. This grave allowed me to meet you. I hope it changes my luck in my next life. No need to bless my happiness in the next life. Just let me live this one. Jack's slender fingers paused while turning the page. He looked down, tightening his lips, taking over a minute before finally nodding. When he spoke again, his voice was hoarse. All right. He wrapped a soft scarf around his neck and put a rabbit-eared hat on me, enfolding me warmly and snugly, leaving only my eyes visible. Jack couldn't help but lightly tap my forehead with his index finger. I, who already resembled a ball, sat heavily on the sofa, panting several times before mustering the energy to laugh. Are you courteous to bully a sick person? Can't resist it. Like a child, Jack took out a lollipop from his pocket. After unwrapping the paper, he gently lowered my scarf and put the lollipop in my mouth, just enough to suppress the metallic taste of blood. After that, Jack picked up an oil-based pen from the table. He kneeled in front of me, gently opening my hand, and wrote on it, stroke by stroke. Munching on the sweet lollipop, I smiled at him in confusion. Why? Writing down a phone number? Jack also smiled, blushing in his eyes. Just making a mark, so if you lose your way, you can find me. Taking the pen back, my palm held Jack's name. I gazed down, silently clenching my hand. As I was about to let go, a tear fell through my fingers. With trembling hands, Jack placed my hand in his, lowering his forehead. He knelt there, burying his face, unable to restrain his tears. For the first time in the 6 months of our acquaintance, I saw his sorrow up close. Lucy, please don't leave, may beg you. I knelt before Jack's parents' grave and bowed my head. I looked at Jack, who was standing far away, and jokingly said, sorry, Mom and Dad, I look kinda ugly now. But believe me, when I have hair and color in my face, I'm actually pretty. So, please bless me, your future daughter-in-law whom you haven't met before. If I live this life, I'll be your daughter-in-law. If not, in the next life. I stopped and took a few seconds to think. After taking a deep breath and regaining some strength, I weakly smiled and said, whether I'm a daughter or a daughter-in-law, I'm already part of your family. I reached out and showed them Jack's palm in my hand. I pointed to the empty grave next to me. I'll be buried with Jack after I die. We'll definitely meet in the next life. If we don't, with this mark, Jack will find me. The cemetery was quiet, with snowflakes falling silently. I raised my eyes slightly, looked past the rows of tombstones, and saw the blurry figures standing there. I called them here to witness me finding new parents and a new family, so they won't bother me anymore. In this life or the next, we're no longer family. Lucy, there's something I haven't told you. Jack carried me steadily, walking slowly on the path in the cemetery. I weakly hugged his neck, saying breathlessly, what is it? My hearing is quite good. And then what? My eyelids felt heavy. I was sleepy. I heard you say you'd be my daughter-in-law. You can't back out now that you've said it yourself. My hand fell limply. Jack suddenly stopped in his tracks, his eyes turning red in an instant. But then he smiled, stepped forward, and continued walking. His tone was still light, but his voice trembled badly. Anyway, I've made a mark. Even if you were reincarnated as a dog in the next life, I'll still find you. Did you hear that, Lucy? You liar. Lucy. Snowflakes fell on my cheeks, making my tears feel icy cold in the midst of the wind and snow. There seemed to be a faint response echoing in my ears. You're the one who will become a dog.